everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to do another story time in makeup, and today's story time is going to be about the Nurse Massacre. This is something that happened in Illinois around the early 1960s, and we are going to jump right in. Our story begins with a man named Richard Speck. He was born in Kirkland, Illinois. Our story begins with a man named Richard Speck, and he was born in Kirkland, Illinois, and was the seventh of 8 children born to Benjamin and Margaret Mary Speck. The family moved to Monmouth, Illinois shortly after Richard was born. He was very close to his father, who died in 1947 from a heart attack, and he was only 53 years old when he passed away. Richard was 6 years old when his father died. A few years after Richard's father passed away, his mother fell in love with an insurance salesman, like a traveling insurance salesman, she met while on a train trip to Chicago. This man that Richard's mother married actually had a criminal record, like a 25-year criminal record for forgery, and then several arrests for drunk driving. He was a heavy drinker. He was definitely very opposite of what his father was. His father was a very hardworking man, and this guy was a alcoholic. Richard moved in with his mother, stepfather, and his sister Carolyn to the East Dallas section of Dallas, Texas. And apparently they moved quite often because he had multiple residences within the next dozen of years or so. So they moved around a lot, and it was always in like the more poorer sections of the towns that they lived in. Richard actually really hated his stepfather. His stepfather was psychologically abusive and would just insult him and threaten him, and it just was not a happy home environment for him. He wasn't a very smart student in school. He ended up dropping out of school at the age of 16. He also started drinking at the age of 12. I'm sorry. He also started drinking at the age of 12. By the time he was 15, he was pretty much drunk every single day. He had his first arrest in 1955 at the age of 13 for trespassing, and this started a stream of other arrests and misdemeanors within the next 8 years. He was able to get a job, however, at the 7-Up bottling company, and he had that job for about 3 years. At that time, he met a 15-year-old woman named Shirley Annette Malone while he was at the Texas State Fair. They dated for about 3 weeks when she ended up pregnant. They actually married in 1962. She gave birth to their daughter, Robbie Lynn. And at the time their daughter was born, Richard was in jail, and his wife did not know he was in jail. He was serving a 22-day sentence for disturbing the peace. In July of 63, he was caught forging and cashing in a co-worker's paycheck, as well as robbing a local grocery store and making away with $3 in cash, cigarettes, and beer. He was 21 years old at the time, and he ended up serving a 3-year sentence for burglary and forgery. However, he was paroled after only serving 16 months of that 3-year sentence. 1 week after his parole, he was wielding a 17-inch carving knife when he attacked a woman in the parking lot of her apartment building when the woman screamed. He was apprehended a few blocks away from when this incident happened, and was convicted of aggravated assault, given another 16-month sentence. Due to an error, he was released after 6 months. On the recommendation of his mother, Speck moved in with a divorced woman with children. This woman was an ex-pro wrestler and a bartender at his favorite bar. The mother at this time had to have known that her son was a troublemaker, and yet the best thing she thought to do was to recommend him stay with some woman and babysit their children. It's awesome. That makes absolutely no sense, but that is the way our story is going. In the meantime, he is separated from his wife. So he is no longer together with his wife. He doesn't really see his child much. And he is now babysitting this woman's 3 children. During all of this babysitting that was going on, he was charged again for aggravated assault because he stabbed a man at this local bar. So the local bar that the bartender he lives with, whose children he's watching, he stabbed a man in that bar and was convicted of aggravated assault, yet he's still watching these kids. I don't know. I need to move on from that. I know. I'm sorry. I just need to move on. But that just is, this story is just crazy. Everything about it is nuts. He was, however, again, he got out of it because the lawyer his mother hired was able to reduce his sentence to disturbing the peace. You stab a man and you get charged with disturbing the peace because your mom hired a good lawyer. Just see the circle of craziness. If you guys are enjoying this story so far, please hit that subscribe button. I do these videos every other Friday, so I would really love for you to hit that subscribe button as well as the notification bell so that you are actually notified when I upload these videos. Moving along, in March of '66, he bought a 12-year-old vehicle and then proceeded to rob another grocery store, stealing 70 cartons of cigarettes. Then he proceeded to sell those cartons of cigarettes from the trunk of his vehicle outside the grocery store he just robbed. So, because he actually bought the car and didn't steal it, after he was done selling these cartons of cigarettes from his vehicle, he abandoned the car. So police were able to track down the car because it was in his name, arrest him for burglary. Because he was arrested again, he was facing obviously another jail time, another jail sentence. So what his sister did, again enabling family, she drove him to a bus depot in Dallas, and he took a bus to Chicago, Illinois. On April 3rd, a woman by the name of Virgil Harris, a 65-year-old woman, a resident of Monmouth, Illinois, was coming home after work at about 1 a.m. and in her home there was an intruder. And this man she described as a very tall man. He was 6 foot tall, he was very polite, and he was brandishing a knife. He spoke very softly and had a southern drawl. The man blindfolded her, tied her up, raped her, ransacked her home, and stole $2.50 she had earned for babysitting that evening. Later that week, a barmaid by the name of Catherine Pierce went missing after she left her brother-in-law's bar that she worked at called Frank's Tavern. She left there about midnight. Her body was found behind the bar in a hog house. She died from a blow to her abdomen and a ruptured liver. Richard Speck frequented this bar that Catherine worked at. The bar was called Frank's Place. I don't know if I mentioned that earlier, but and it was Catherine's brother-in-law who owned this bar. So Richard had frequented this bar and helped build the hog house behind the bar. So he was very familiar with that area. Because he was familiar with that area, he was brought in for questioning. And the police told him to stay put, don't go anywhere because we're going to be asking you some more questions. Well, of course, he got the heck out of there. When the police arrived at the place that he was staying, he was nowhere to be found. He had, gotten out of Dodge. In searching the room that he was staying in, though, they did find some jewelry and a radio that was reported missing by Virgil Harris, the 65-year-old woman he robbed and attacked. Then he found himself staying with his sister Martha, her husband, and their family. And the husband or the brother-in-law tried to help him find some more work. So he was having a hard time keeping jobs because he kept drinking and kept getting in fights with people. And so again, his family enabled his behavior by constantly trying to help him find jobs and stay out of trouble. On July 11th, he had overstayed his welcome in his sister's house. So the brother-in-law then drove him to this hall that, or NMU hall, to help him find work. And he was given an assignment, but it ended up being, once he arrived at the spot that he was supposed to work, he found out that they didn't need him. So he was really upset that he was sent to an assignment that wasn't really for him. So then he took his bags back to the hall and waited for another assignment. Then grew tired of waiting at the hall and ended up taking the $25 that his sister had given him and spent it day drinking at various taverns. While he was day drinking at those taverns, he accosted another woman, a 53-year-old woman by the name of Ella Mae Hopper. He took her by knife point, raped her, and stole her handgun. On July 13th, 1966, at around 11 p.m., armed with that hunting knife and that pistol that he stole, or when he assaulted that woman, he broke into a 2-story townhouse in the neighborhood on the Chicago's far south side. 9 student nurses who worked for South Chicago Community Hospital lived in this residence. Speck made his way upstairs and confronted 6 women who were at the home at that time, herding them into a single bedroom. He then told them that he was not going to hurt them, he was just going to rob them. However, he did bind their hands and their feet. In the meantime, 3 other nurses arrived at the home during the time that he was in their home, and he bound those women as well. So all 9 women were trapped inside this home with their legs and their feet tied. At this point in time, he did start killing these poor innocent women. One by one, he led them into another room and either stabbed them or strangled them. He did end up raping one of the women. His victims were 20-year-old Pamela Lee Wilkening, 20-year-old Marianne Jordan, 21-year-old Susan Bridget Ferris, 24-year-old Nina Jo Schmally, 22-year-old Patricia Ann Matusik, 22-year-old Gloria Jean Davey, 23-year-old Valentina P. Passion, and 23-year-old Merlita Ornado Gargulo. I'm so sorry if I said that incorrectly. These are 8 of the 9 women that were brutally murdered by this Richard Speck. During the time of this mass murder, Richard Speck did make one big mistake. One of the 9 women that were in this townhouse managed to scoot herself under a bed and hide without being detected by Richard. He must have lost count of how many women were actually in the townhouse, but she was able to hide herself. Her name was Corazon Moreau, and I am so sorry if I butchered that last name. She was a 23-year-old nurse, was an exchange student from the Philippines. Eventually, police arrived at the scene and were greeted with an unimaginable scene, a crime scene. The 8 women who were in the prime of their lives were all, that was all taken away from them by this horrible man. Survivor was able to give a description of Richard Speck to the police, and they were able to track him down 2 days later. There must have been a drifter that recognized him and was able to give police some more information. Police were able to track down Richard Speck and arrest him. Richard Speck was taken into custody and was positively identified by the surviving nurse. At the trial, she was also able to identify him. She walked right up to him, pointed at him, and said, "This is the man who killed my friends." April 15th, a juror took 49 minutes to convict him of a murder, and he was sentenced to the electric chair. Although his death sentence was overturned overturned and he was resentenced in 1972, 8 consecutive sentences of 50 to 150 years. Shortly before December 5th, 1991, Richard Speck died due to clogged arteries, emphysema, and an enlarged heart. His sister was worried that his grave would be desecrated, so the family decided to cremate him. I hope you enjoyed this week's story time and makeup. If you did, remember to hit that subscribe button so you can be notified every other Friday when I upload these types of videos. Thank you so much, and I'll see you again soon. Bye.